Welcome to the WBEZ live stream, where you get caught up and dive deep into the news from Chicago and beyond. Join us again later. We're always here.
Discovered a motive behind last weekend's mass shooting at a ballroom dance venue. 11 people were killed. Vice President Harris visited the dance hall in Monterey Park yesterday to offer support to victims and their families. She urged Americans to call on federal and state lawmakers to pass increased gun safety regulations.
Will they do something? That is where we all must speak up and speak to our elected representatives about what we have a right to expect that they will do in the interest of the safety, the security, and the well-being of people like those whose lives were ended here.
Separately, authorities in Northern California have charged a suspect for Monday's mass shooting in Half Moon Bay with premeditated murder. The alleged gunman is accused of killing 7 workers at 2 farms. A murder trial that's attracted worldwide attention is underway in South Carolina. Jurors heard opening arguments yesterday in the case against Alec Murdaugh. He's a once prominent attorney charged with killing his wife and son. South Carolina Public Radio's Victoria Hansen has more.
The prosecution says Murdaugh murdered his loved ones to gain sympathy and distract from a decades-long embezzlement crime spree that was about to be discovered. They say they have cell phone video putting the 54-year-old at the crime scene and have determined shell casings found near the wife's body match a rifle that Murdaugh owned but can no longer be found. Defense attorney Dick Harpootlian contends the state doesn't have a case.
To you, what you have heard from the Attorney General as facts are not. They're his theories, his conjecture.
Harpootlian says there are no fingerprints, no murder weapons, and no motive. For NPR News, I'm Victoria Hansen in Walterboro, South Carolina.
You're listening to NPR News.
Light snow, patchy fog, and 30 degrees. The wind chill is 19. It's 7:04. I'm Lisa Labez with WBEZ News. A third federal lawsuit has been filed against Illinois' recently enacted assault weapons ban. This lawsuit was filed Tuesday by a nonprofit group called Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois. It says the weapons ban is an unconstitutional infringement on the civil rights of law-abiding residents. The lawsuit lists Governor J.B. Pritzker, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, and Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly as defendants. The Chicago Board of Education has approved a new policy to determine whether students in key years can move on to the next grade. WBEZ's Sarah Karp reports.
For decades, to ward off social promotion, 3rd, 6th, and 8th graders had to pass standardized tests to move on. Under the new policy, standardized tests will no longer be considered. It'll be all about getting a C or above, and the key grades will be 2nd, 5th, and 8th. Bogdanya Chikambova is the Chief Education Officer.
I do believe that our educators have a good, judgment. They're responsible for providing grades, and grades are clearly the best indicator of student success.
She says the district will try to make sure grades reflect the same level of performance at all schools. Sarah Karp, WBEZ News.
Chicago residents starting today can cast their vote for the city's next mayor. Early voting opening today at 2 locations in downtown. One is a super site at Clark and Lake at 191 North Clark, and the other is at the City Board of Election Commissioner's office on the 6th floor of 69 West Washington. Each of Chicago's 50 wards will be opening its own early voting location in a few weeks. Voters are selecting from 9 candidates on the ballot for mayor, plus city council members from each of the 50 wards. Election Day is February 28th. The Illinois Department of Human Services has announced additional COVID benefits for the food aid program known as SNAP are ending. So starting March 1st, benefits return to pre-pandemic levels. This will impact more than 2 million people. IDHS predicts recipients will see a decrease of $95 to $250 per month. Sports: Bulls are playing the Charlotte Hornets in Charlotte, and the Blackhawks are in Calgary against the Flames. The Wolves lost to the Tucson Roadrunners on the road yesterday, 4-1. I'm Lisa Labez. This is WBEZ News. Traffic outbound Bishop Ford, the ramp to eastbound I-80 94. Watch out. There's some Crews on the ramp working on a 4-vehicle crash right there. And on Metro's Union Pacific West Line, inbound and outbound trains are running about 20 minutes behind schedule because there was a bus on the tracks near College Avenue. Watch for slick conditions as we do have a little bit of snow falling this morning.
WBEZ Traffic is supported by Unbound, helping children and families in need. More at unbound.org.
Ahead, the Pope says criminalizing homosexuality is unjust. You'll hear reaction from a gay Chilean man who is a survivor of clergy sex abuse. That conversation in 15 minutes.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Walton Family Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems to improve lives today and benefit future generations. More information at waltonfamilyfoundation.org.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Leila Fadel.
And I'm Steve Inskeep. The next time Donald Trump takes a selfie, he may, if he chooses, post it on Instagram.
Yeah, he can also use Facebook if he likes to, comment on your mother-in-law's family news. Meta, the company that owns both platforms, says he may come back. They lifted the suspension imposed 2 years ago when Trump tried to overturn a Democratic election.
We do not know if the former president will come back to those platforms, but NPR's Shannon Bond has been asking why he is allowed. Shannon, good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
What is Meta's reasoning?
Well, essentially, it says time has passed. Things are different. Immediately after the Capitol insurrection, Meta thought the risk that Trump would incite more violence was just too high to let him keep posting. And remember, this wasn't just a move from Facebook and Instagram. He was also kicked off of Twitter and YouTube and Snapchat. It was really this unprecedented and controversial wave. But then Facebook said it would reconsider its ban after 2 years, and that time is up. The company says it's gone through this process, reviewing its own policies and the larger environment, including how the midterm elections went. And it says it thinks the risk to public safety has, quote, sufficiently receded. Facebook says it believes people should be able to hear what politicians have to say, but it also says Trump does have to follow its rules, and so it's going to put guardrails in place.
What kind of guardrails do they mean?
Well, because of what happened in large part on January 6th, Facebook has created a new set of policies specifically for public figures in times of civil unrest and violence. And that means if Trump continues to break the rules, he could face up to another 2-year suspension. And given just how high profile he is, these previous violations, Meta says they're going to watch very closely what he posts, even content that might be, borderline.
There might be a lot of people posting opinions about this decision regarding Donald Trump.
Yes. I mean, this is a decision that, like the decision to suspend him in the first place, is very controversial. He has been, since being kicked off of mainstream social media, he's been posting on his own website, Truth Social, false claims of election fraud, QAnon conspiracy theories. And so Democratic politicians and civil rights organizations and advocacy groups are pointing to that and saying it shows he is still a big risk to public safety. Some also say this sets a dangerous precedent around the world. There are far-right authoritarian leaders who look to Trump and how he uses social media as a model. Trump, meanwhile, is taking a victory lap on Truth Social. He says this should never happen again to a sitting president. But the next question is, will he actually use Facebook again once he gets his account back in the coming weeks? He was allowed back on Twitter back in November, but he has not been posting there. He's stuck to Truth Social.
Well, help me understand in this changing social media landscape, is it a powerful tool for a politician to be on Facebook at this point, or to be denied it for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook, it does not probably have the clout it did when Trump was banned. Things have changed. But what it's very important for is fundraising. And Trump is running for president again in 2024. That is going to be a really critical channel. In fact, his campaign formally petitioned Facebook to let him back on. And I think no matter how much he talks up Truth Social, which he helped create and financially backs, he has just a fraction of the reach he has on Facebook and Twitter. So it's hard to imagine there wouldn't be a very strong pull for him to return to these bigger platforms.
NPR's Shannon Bond has enormous reach here on this platform. Shannon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Not only is former President Trump returning to Facebook and Instagram, he's also returning to the campaign trail for the first time since announcing his re-election bid in November. Trump will speak to New Hampshire Republicans on Saturday before going to South Carolina. Meanwhile, the first primary is a little more than a year away, and no Republican has come forward to challenge Trump. Zach Montalero is a reporter at Politico, and he looked into why. Good morning, Zach.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So what did you find out? Why doesn't Trump have any competition yet?
Well, it's really a two-pronged problem for Republicans in the race. One is Trump himself, kind of a reverse of 2016. Candidates think now, and their advisors think now, that if they get in the race, a one-on-one match with Trump would be a disadvantage, would be bad for them, that they would be attacked pretty ruthlessly by the former president, that if the intention is on a 1-versus-1 race, it would end up poorly for them. And then the other part is that there's some level of voter fatigue. We have had a busy 6 years, I would say, since the 2016 election, and there's some thinking that voters just at some point aren't ready for another presidential campaign.
Yeah, but at some point, if they want to challenge him, they have to get in the race. Are they coordinating so it's not a one-on-one?
Right. We're not that far away from the first election. It feels like it, but, a year is not that long in political time, especially to run a national campaign. So there has been at least some background chatter. Okay, you get in first and we'll follow along. The likely situation here is that the one candidate will make the plunge, will get in the race to face off against Trump 1v1, and will likely not share that stage for very long. But we're kind of in a standoff right now for somebody to make that first move.
So is that person the sacrifice?
I'm not sure if sacrifice is the right term, but they'll certainly have a couple of weeks of unique campaigning. Going up against the former president when they're the sole target will have its benefits, of course. Fundraising, it's easier to fundraise when you're one of two as opposed to one of 7 or 8 or 10 or 12. But they will also have to face down Trump's wrath. We've seen the former president attack even folks he thinks could be candidates, thinking about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He hasn't announced a campaign yet, but Trump has already started to attack him, thinking that he might run against him.
Right. So any indication of who might be the first?
We've heard some rumblings about UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who served during Trump's tenure in the White House, potentially making a move soon. But beyond that, a lot of candidates have shown they're pretty comfortable waiting. Ron DeSantis is one of the only candidates spending money on important digital ads, spending any meaningful amount of money. Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State under the former President Trump, just said yesterday on TV, he'll make a decision in a couple of months. So at this point, no one seems super eager to be the first one in the race.
Are they waiting it out a little bit, hoping that maybe Trump will take himself out between his legal issues and moves like dining with an anti-Semite?
That's certainly part of it, is that the former president hasn't had a great run of it since launching his campaign. He really hasn't even been campaigning. Now, this weekend could be the change to that. As you mentioned earlier, he's actually going to the earlier states. He's going to be back on Facebook. But since Trump launched his campaign, he hasn't actually fundraised all that much online. He hasn't actually traveled. So they're pretty content to let Trump do what he wants to do on his own.
In the few seconds we have left, what about the anti-Trump candidates that there are rumblings about? Former Representative Liz Cheney, Larry Hogan, the former Maryland governor, are they going to declare?
They're up in the air too. We haven't seen among many of these candidates, they are the few that haven't actually made any sort of those serious steps yet, other than that background move like hiring staffs.
Zach Montalero from Politico, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Drug dealers have been using social media sites, especially Snapchat, to market fentanyl to children. Some lawmakers want tech companies held liable for that. Here's NPR addiction correspondent Brian Mann.
3 years ago, Amy Neville went to her son Alex's bedroom and found him lying dead on a beanbag chair.
That amazing child who could do anything that he set his mind to was gone.
Alex was 14. He overdosed on fentanyl. Neville told her family's story to a House panel Wednesday in Washington. She described how Alex fell into drug use using Snapchat.
It was on Snapchat that Alex was able to visit with dealers and other users. It was on Snapchat that he set up a deal to get pills. It was on Snapchat that he made plans to have the dealer drive up to our house so Alex could sneak out for a couple of minutes one night and get anything he wanted.
The dealer who sold a fentanyl-laced pill to Alex was never caught or prosecuted. Snap, the company that makes Snapchat, hasn't acknowledged any role in his death. Neville testified that social media platforms aren't being held accountable for putting kids like her son at risk. She and other witnesses called for changes to a part of federal law known as Section 230. Section 230 shields social media companies from most civil lawsuits linked to content on their platforms that's created by users, including users dealing drugs.
The question isn't whether tech is completely responsible for illicit drug sales. They aren't.
That's Congressman Kelly Armstrong, a Republican from North Dakota.
The question is what duty we should impose on those platforms to mitigate illegal illicit drug sales. The answer can no longer be 230's near total immunity.
Critics at this hearing said immunity from civil lawsuits has allowed social media companies to focus on the profits that come from attracting and engaging young people rather than focusing on safety. Laura Marquez Garrett is an attorney with a group called the Social Media Victims Law Center that's suing Snap.
We have a client who literally drove to Snap's physical address because she was trying to report a dealer who killed her son. She could not get through to anyone. She could not find a 1-800 number.
Witnesses also testified that tech companies are slow to cooperate with law enforcement. Much of the criticism fell on Snap, and the company acknowledges drug dealers are targeting kids on their platform for one reason.
This is where young people are, right? This is where teens come to communicate and to connect with their friends.
Jennifer Stout is Snap's vice president for global public policy. She says the company is working to identify and shut down accounts opened by drug dealers and getting better at cooperating with law enforcement.
In recent months, we have only increased our investments here to help us strengthen our ability to fulfill law enforcement requests for information. We prioritize these based on urgency. We respond to emergency disclosure requests, often in less than 30 minutes.
But fentanyl deaths are rising fast among teenagers and children, and most experts agree social media platforms have made fentanyl-laced pills easily accessible to kids. Wednesday's hearing shows Congress and tech companies face intense pressure to make children safer when they go online. Brian Mann, NPR News.
This is NPR News.
719, 28 degrees, a little snow. Temperature going up to 32 on this chilly Thursday. Ahead on Morning Edition, you'll learn more about the federal antitrust case targeting Google's digital advertising business. You'll get context from University of Chicago professor Luigi Zingales, who will weigh in 15 minutes. WBEZ is supported by Symphony Center Presents Jazz. The Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis returns January 27th with special guest oud virtuoso Nasir Shama. More at cso.org/jazz.
The late night show Jimmy Kimmel Live has been on air for 20 years and it's still going.
I was almost sure I was going to stop. I was nearly positive because part of it's just OCD. Just 20 years sounds right.
I'm Ari Shapiro. We take a trip to Jimmy Kimmel's office and look back on his career on All Things Considered from NPR News.
That's today at 3 o'clock on 91.5 WBEZ.
Some other headlines we are paying attention to today. Workers at Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago joining a growing list of cultural employees who want to form a union. Chicago residents can cast votes starting today for the next mayor. Election day is February 28th. And the annual JCC Chicago Jewish Film Festival is showcasing films today through Sunday, and then we'll screen a few more in February. This month's films focus on the Holocaust. There is a mix of virtual and in-person events with that festival. Weather forecast on the cloudy side and a little bit of snow. We're expecting a high of 32. It's 28 in the downtown area right now. Any accumulation, not more than an inch. And then cloudy tonight, a few isolated snow showers and a low of 18. It's 721 WBEZ.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia. For 30 years, committed to advancing educational innovations and research that improves pre-K to 12 learning. More at edutopia.org. From the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, for more than 95 years, supporting efforts to promote a just, equitable, and sustainable society. More at mott.org. From Mattress Firm, dedicated to providing personalized service with the goal of helping people sleep well so they can live well. Customers can shop their range of products in-store or online at mattressfirm.com. And from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation at rwjf.org.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Steve Inskeep.
And I'm Leila Fadel. Pope Francis says that homosexuality is a sin, but it is not a crime. And then he went further, saying the church must work against unjust laws that make it a crime. He made the comments in an interview with the Associated Press just before an upcoming trip to South Sudan, one of at least 67 countries with anti-gay laws. Joining us now to discuss the significance of these statements is Juan Carlos Cruz. He first met Pope Francis in 2018 when he and other survivors of sexual abuse by a Chilean priest were invited to the Vatican. Cruz is openly gay and now an advisor to the Pope on LGBTQ+ issues. He's also a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Leila. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I would love to just hear your initial reaction to hearing the Pope say this publicly.
You know, it's been an incredible day with his statement, something that no pope has ever done in history. And in a moment where the LGBT community all over the world needs it because it's being attacked, it's condemned, there's laws that criminalize it. And so it's a great day.
Do you think it could actually have impact on changing some of these laws? As we pointed out, there are these laws in dozens of countries. Sometimes they carry the death penalty.
Exactly. It's horrifying. But the fact that Pope Francis, a leader that is respected morally around the world, does say this. It's time for civil authorities, for bishops, cardinals, as he says, to change their heart and start speaking up as well.
Yeah. Did it surprise you, as somebody who knows the Pope and speaks to him about these issues, that he said this publicly?
No, you know, it doesn't surprise me from Pope Francis. He's a man that is open to everybody, who holds the dignity of the person in the highest standards. And the LGBT community is very in his heart. I would not say this if I didn't know it. I know this for a fact, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah. But this doesn't shift the church's views on homosexuality, right? I mean, it still teaches that it's intrinsically disordered, homosexual acts.
Yeah, those words are shameful, actually. But if you see the Pope highlights that the LGBTQ+ community is not sinful and criminal, and he says harming one's neighbor is most certainly both. So it's the bedrock of Catholic teaching. He shifts this. Wording, like you said it, Leila, but he highlights how important it is that it's more sinful, having things against your neighbor or being uncharitable or criminal towards the gay community. That's sinful.
Now, your relationship with the Pope started out pretty complicated, right? At first, he questioned your credibility. You were, as you put it, mortal enemies, I think, is that what you said? But that's changed, and now you're his advisor on these issues. How has the Pope's views evolved since you came to know him?
You know, the Pope that I knew that I saw in 2017 versus the Pope that I met and after a few meetings in 2018, it's 180-degree difference, right? It's surprising. We normally say older people, it's hard to change their views or change. And a man in his 80s, he's not going to change. This man does change and does acknowledge when he has made a mistake, and he said it publicly, and I admire that in him. There's a lot still to do in terms of abuse in the church. By no means we're done, but and also in the LGBT issue, but he's taken great steps, and they're sincere, and that I appreciate.
Juan Carlos Cruz is a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors and an advisor to the Pope on LGBTQ+ issues. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Leila. I appreciate you guys calling me. Thank you.
A murder trial in South Carolina is now underway. A fourth-generation prosecutor is accused of killing his wife and son. The story of Alec Murdaugh inspired numerous documentaries and podcasts before this trial. Here's South Carolina Public Radio's Victoria Hanson.
Alec Murdaugh called 911 breathless and sobbing, saying he'd found the bodies of his loved ones on the family's rural property in 2021. But prosecutor Creighton Waters says Murdaugh killed them, using a shotgun on his 22-year-old son and a rifle on his wife.
Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen and the leg, and took her down. And after that, there were additional shots.
Waters says shell casings found around Maggie's body match those of a rifle Murdaugh once owned, but can no longer be found. And he says cell phone video puts the 54-year-old at the crime scene, despite his claims otherwise. As for a motive, Waters says Murdaugh planned the murders to gain sympathy and distract from a decades-long financial embezzlement crime spree that was about to be exposed.
Listen to that gathering storm that all came to a head on June 7th, 2021, the day the evidence will show he killed Maggie and Paul.
But defense attorney Dick Harpootlian says there's no motive, no evidence, no bloody clothing, fingerprints, murder weapons, and...
Was there enough time to kill Paul and then find the AR and then ambush Maggie?
Harpootlian says he has video, too, showing Murdaugh and his son spending time together about an hour before the murders.
That he executes him in a brutal fashion. Not believable.
The lead up to this trial has captivated people here and around the world. Now jurors will hear testimony to determine what they believe happened on that June night. For NPR News, I'm Victoria Hanson in Walterboro, South Carolina.